So I want to congratulate you guys on the upcoming season 3. It is amazing. So as seasoned pros of this show, you know, how has it been writing Harley and seeing how she changes and grows? Because obviously we know comic book characters kind of reset at the end of their arcs typically, but we've really seen her sort of evolve. And how's that been?
Yeah, that's one of the most fun parts about this show is like, you know, we come from episodic television, like that's where we made our bones in network TV, and it is very much a reset after every episode. So we were really excited to kind of take this character in a different place each season, build on what we did before. And yeah, I think that's been, for me at least, one of the most rewarding things about writing Harley.
Yeah, I mean, the big thing with this season was, you know, given the way that season 2 ended with, you know, it's firmly establishing that Harley is a thing. They are a couple. We were like, well, this is, of course, what we want to explore this season. And we thought, you know, like we've constantly kind of banged this drum of like, these two are now never going to break up. And as long as we are running the show, they will never break up. So
hopefully this won't air after we're fired for whatever reason.
We will riot if you fire. If you're fired.
But yeah, it presented this really interesting challenge of like, how do you create sort of drama between these two, knowing that, you know, at the end of the day, they're rock solid. And so we sort of used, I guess, Harley's discovery this season of like, where she kind of lands on the moral spectrum or the moral compass, you know, where that points versus Ivy's. And this season is really going to focus a lot on Ivy and her sort of embracing her inner villain. And, you know, creating Harley kind of initially inspiring Ivy to find her confidence, to follow her passion, which in this case is to essentially terraform all of Gotham back to its prehistoric days, therefore eradicating all of humanity within the confines of the city, at least initially. And yeah, and how does Harley like ultimately feel about that? Yeah.
I love that, and also I love that she calls it Edin with an I. I thought that was I thought that was very funny.
Ivy's never good at naming things or anything off the cuff. She just is like the worst improviser that there is.
I can relate to that very deeply. So I just want to talk about one thing that I absolutely love, which is the Bane voice.
Oh man, James Adomian.
I could do that Bane voice forever and never be sick of it. How do you decide what you want to pull from, you know, live action and what aspects you want to like that are iconic to a certain character? What goes into that process? Or are you guys just like, this is a hilarious voice, we got to use it?
I think it's if we can figure out what the comedic angle is that has legs, right? Like there's sometimes you can do things with characters where that's going to be funny for about 5 minutes. And then what's that going to be for the entire run of the show? Does this character have legs? And with Bane, just this idea of this, like, I remember when Shane Glines, who was he's the character designer of Harley, and he designed Bane. And when I saw the first design of Bane, I was like, oh, this is so good. How did you come up with this? And he was like, Bane seems to me like a guy who like doesn't do leg day. He does like he only works out his upper body. And I was like, oh yeah, that's that fucking guy. Like he's like, you know, he's this sort of like self-conscious, a little bit pedantic, like sort of dude who's super jacked and has a temper. And it was just like, oh, there's so much to like mine out of this guy. So I think like in those like smaller characters, it is like, is there a comedic angle to this? Like this season, there's a lot of Nora Freeze. And Nora is like another character where our comedic angle was like she's been frozen for 20 years and now she wants to fucking party. And like she's got a bunch of like issues she's not dealing with because she's just deciding to party instead.
Yeah, it's hard too because DC's kind of given us carte blanche at this point to kind of do whatever we want with most of the characters. And so it's just talking it to death in the writer's room ad nauseum to really find out it's alchemy ultimately. Yeah.
I love it. I love what you create, so it is gold. I really want to know, working with so many of these actors that aren't traditionally voice actors. You had Alfred Molina, you had Giancarlo Esposito, Alan Tudyk, who I love as Clayface, another voice that is just amazing. How do you convince these actors to work with you, or do they come to you? Like, what's the story?
Well, it started with season 1. I think it started once we had Kaley as Harley. I think it gave a sense of maybe, I don't know, cachet, right? That like other actors who are traditionally like on camera were like interested in doing it, and kind of like stunt casting it a little bit. And once we had like Kaley and Lake, then we were able to just call up like our actor friends who we've worked with before. Like we worked with Chris Maloney on a live action Fox comedy for a year. And we're like, hey, Chris, what do you think about this unhinged take on Jim Gordon?
He was like, I like it.
He's so into it. He's like, he's somebody who, has not done a lot of voice stuff before, like to the point where like when we were shooting the pilot, Diedrich Bader, we had him and Diedrich Bader, who voices Batman on the show, in the same room, which is rare for us, in the same recording booth. And Diedrich had to like tell Chris not to like walk away from the microphone because he's like he's just acting it out.
He's
like,
walking it out.
He's like blocked it out. Like and so
he's doing the scene.
I've never seen somebody crack himself up as much as Chris when he's doing Unhinged Maloney. He's like, I'm just so giddy. But yeah, it was a combination of like, having like Kaley's cachet, being able to call up actors that we worked with before, Ron Funches and Alan Tudyk, we worked with together on Powerless.
Dean Lorey, who was our co-creator, had worked with Tony Hale
on Arrested Development, and so and Wanda Sykes was a friend of his. She voiced Queen of Fables. We were just lucky.
I mean, I love it. I love getting to see the voices. Christopher Maloney is indeed hilarious. You can tell that he loves that role as
he is
very
Gordon
kooky
now.
Jim Gordon. Yeah,
he is Gordon to me.
It makes sense. Like that character just makes sense. When I first saw it, I was like, yes, this is.
He's seen some bad things.
He would have really bad PTSD and be like totally unhinged.
Yeah, I mean, his man crush on Batman is like everything to me. So I love that in this story you can kind of dig really deep into character development, but also have these really like funny body jokes. How do you balance that and not, lean too far into one direction or the other? We
start in the writer's room. We always start with like, what's the emotional story we're telling, right? In every episode, like, what's this episode really about? And so once we kind of like figure out like, here is the emotionally resonant story we're telling, which like when you hear it as you're pitching it out, it like will oftentimes sound very dramatic when we're like talking about it in the writer's room. But then once we have it, then it's like, okay, then what is the comedic engine that will drive this episode so that we can tell this story? So like in the 4th episode of the show of this season, there's like they go to like an Eyes Wide Shut, Court of Owls like fuck party, and in that episode, it is a moment when Harley and Ivy have probably like one of their larger, more emotional conversations, and that's kind of what our show could do. Is like we can do these crazy things, but as long as there's emotional grounding in the episode, it'll work.
Yeah, but like with the aforementioned fuck party, we've been waiting to do that episode for like 3 seasons. We I think it was Jameson Borak, who's one of our writers, had pitched it like season 1, and we were like, we love it, but we can't figure out an organic way to bring it in. And then season 3, it was like, that's the one.
Yeah, that's
it.
The way
there
we
it
do
is. And it slid right in.
If there was ever a group to do an orgy, it would be the Court of Owls. So
felt right.
Makes a lot of sense. I love the Bat family. Harvey Guillén is just amazing as Nightwing. I love the like emo voice that he has. I think it's astounding. How did you get him? How did you cast him? What was that situation like? Was it another like, we know a friend who knows a friend?
No, that one we heard a lot of people for it, right?
We did, yeah. Warner Brothers Casting convinced him to read for it. Well, I don't even know if they had to convince him. He was just, I think he was excited to do it, and it felt like a no-brainer once we heard his read.
Yeah.
And we wanted to do the sort of, brooding emo Titans version of Titans the Show version of the whole fuck Batman version of Nightwing, and explore what would happen if he returned to the Batcave with the ecosystem having changed now that Batgirl is a new addition to the family, and he's never met her before, and he feels like he's being pushed out, and he's very insecure about that. And yeah, so like their sort of chemistry is off because of Nightwing's return.
I love that scene. I love that we get to see Macaroni again as well. a real joy. I want to know also James Gunn, getting him to play himself and also have some great scenes with Clayface. How did that come about? And also, did you inspire him to make a actual Thomas Wayne biopic in the future?
We're not allowed to talk about that last part. But stick around Saturday in Hall H. They'll be announcing it. No, we knew he was a fan of the show. He had tweeted about it very generously, without us ever having spoken to him. He was just a fan, and we happened to follow each other on Twitter. I had never spoken to him before. I DM'd him out of the blue, and I said, hey, shot in the dark, big fans. Here's what we're thinking about doing. And I'm not kidding, within 15 minutes, he had responded, I'm in. Here's my rep's information. And then like 2 weeks later, voice directing him remotely. He was up in Vancouver shooting Peacemaker. And we had him for like an hour, and we just knocked out everything that he did in the season. He was fantastic. He's a really funny improviser. I
mean, next thing is getting John Cena on as a Peacemaker, right?
I
next
would
season.
love it.
There we go.
I mean, I'm also free to do voices if you would like. So, this season, I love that we get more of the Bat family. I love that we get more Batman. Also, how did you decide to expand beyond just, because obviously the show is called Harley Quinn, but I love that we get to, explore more of the characters. How did you decide, okay, this is the season we want to do this, or this is the season we want to do that?
Again, I think it starts from like thematically, what do we want? What do we find interesting about Harley and Ivy and these characters, over the course of an entire season? Like, how do we want them to grow? And I think the big thing for us was like, okay, well, how do you exist in a good relationship when you've only been in bad ones, and what habits do you take from those bad ones and put into your good ones that start to fuck up your good ones, right? And I think like the big idea we were thinking about was like, oh, Harley only knows one way to be in a relationship, which is like, nothing she wants matters. It only matters what my partner wants, and I'm going to put everything into them, right? And that worked with the Joker because he was a narcissist. But Ivy is not that. And so it was, we were like, oh, well, let's chart this arc of what it's like for Harley to realize I might want something different from my partner, and can I still exist in this relationship if we want different things?
I'm glad that you said that they won't break up under your kingdom. I don't know. Stewardship. I was like, what is the word for it? Because I was definitely a little bit worried. I was like, oh, are they gonna go backwards? But no. But I do like that there's struggles there still in a burgeoning relationship. With so many exciting characters, like new characters coming in, how do you guys decide, like, when it comes to like comic books, what you're gonna pull from, like stories that you're gonna pull from? What is the thought process? Or are you just like, wouldn't it be cool if we had Man Bat in this scene or something like that?
I think generally we do look to the books, past and present, for like, kind of general inspiration, like, especially with the first couple of seasons when we were looking to kind of like pull from the hits, right? And so like just one example was like No Man's Land, right? Such a huge event in DC publishing that just felt so right for our story, and it just became again, like it was like this serendipitous thing where we do have writers who are knowledgeable about the comics who are on staff, and then we have a lot of just comedy nerds, but we can put our heads together and between the handful of us kind of have pretty much like an encyclopedic knowledge of, and of course DC is helpful with that as well if we ever get stuck for like a character or something that we can pull from. But yeah, if something feels right and something feels like familiar in a good way, but we can kind of put our own spin on it, like the No Man's Land thing that we did in season 2, yeah, we'll just do it, because they have. I mean, it's like people have asked us before, like, are you guys going to create original characters? Like Harley obviously originated in the comics, and like we never set out to do that, because there's thousands of characters that we can pull from. So what's the point, especially when we can put our own spin on things? So Yeah,
but then
we pull
also
from all of it.
sometimes, yes, we want Man-Bat in a scene.
Because he
I want
voices
Man-Bat in a
Man-Bat.
scene.
I do voice
Yeah.
Man-Bat.
Well, you know, you gotta. This is one person who would like more Man-Bat.
More courtroom scenes with Man-Bat.
Yeah. Just to close everything out, you know, I want to bring up the whole Batman and Catwoman's scene that we unfortunately didn't get to see. I know that you guys like to push the envelope when it comes to those kinds of things. Are there any more scenes that they were like, the WB was like, maybe we don't want to go in that direction, or DC was maybe we don't want to go in that direction, or are they like, you know, people seem to respond very positively to that idea? And
You know, DC kind of lets us. They give us the rope to hang ourselves with, and I would say that this year we never really got any pushback. This year they were really supportive. There was a couple times that we like pulled ourselves back from moments that would have been like maybe too far. But yeah, I think like DC gets what the show is, and they like that the show sort of like has this sort of irreverent sense of humor, and really it's like they give us the keys to the castle. I mean, it's pretty amazing.
well, amazing. And I want to thank you guys for talking with me, and I can't wait for everybody to see season 3 of Harley Quinn.
Thank you for having
Thank
us.
you.